I'm going to start off with a poem from the book that Ron edited, Undocumented, and it's by Rob Hardy, the Poet Laureate of Northfield, Minnesota. The Edmund Pettus Bridge rises in a long arc 100 feet above the Alabama River. On Sunday, the 7th of March, 1965, the men and women marching out of Selma couldn't see until they reached the top of the arc, the violence waiting for them on the other side. They thought they saw death waiting in the wall of billy clubs raised to block the road ahead. But the marchers followed that descending arc, still believing it would bend towards justice. Sometimes we seem to have come so far, to have risen near the height of history's moral arc, only to descend. But we keep moving forward. We come from different places and different faiths, to live together in the city of bridges, where the land arcs upward on either side of a moody river, dreamed into the sacred space by a man who believed in brotherhood, who believed in justice, who believed that we would all join hands and walk together into the promised land. Dr. King understood that belief is a bridge to carry us from where we are to where we want to be. To get there, we still have to rise up and march. The arc of the moral universe still needs the weight of people standing together to make it bend. So given our location, I decided to read a poem by Jack Hirschman, who's a communist poet, and he was the Poet Laureate of San Francisco in 2006. It's called Poem for the Millennium. Amid history's dust, among vestigial bones of old ideologies, 1 foot forward but seemingly no way forward or back, an originary thinking, a dream beating its head against a computer screen that's already infomercial-lit. Some see the millennium as billions of people in need, some as billions of bucks. Some see the gap widening between the haves and have-nots. Some see the gap globally expanding its shops. How to get a roof over everyone's head. How to get 3 squares for all, ad infinitum. There's more terror, more greed, more wraparound cars, more thugs and scorpions disguised as democracy. More wars, more cops, more poor, more poor, more poor, and homeless masses in rags. Garbage pickers, panhandlers, whores, more mass graves, slave labor payoff promises, arms unsleeving in needle alleys, swarms of tourists passing by. Death, you tear our hearts out and say, see, they're only muscles, and feed them to the son of prophets. Death, we're up to here in your blood works, and have had enough of the back-break and shell game that hustles us dry. We're sick of this destiny of exploitation and want another kind of society and can have and will. The bottom line moved in Seattle almost 7 years since LA on a wider stage. 40,000 workers with environmentalists internationally strong and the kick-ass of the new class screwing the tear gas in the jails. Rising against the spiral song, against the negation that is capital. And now we can and will put more poor sparks to those aglow on every wrong, together making a millennial fire that will spread our desire for a world cooperatively tuned, like an instrument all people will have a hand in the making and playing of, to get the whole body of soul back, and the dignity nailed to the garbage pail, and the faces ripped off and the feelings killed, and be able to at last walk out of every moment's jail in a world where a piece of bread will profitlessly belong to all, and where you'll come to adore, no longer a stranger, and find the place is yours, simply because you're human, and free as well as schools and hospitals for you to live your heart out the way it was meant to beat. When I became Poet Laureate 2 years ago, this was the first event that I had to do, and it was right after the tragedy in Charlottesville. This poem is called Charlottesville. United we stand, together as one. Daughters, mothers, fathers, and sons, members of every religion and race. In these difficult times we have chosen to embrace. We stand in solidarity with Charlottesville. We must as a nation condemn those who kill. We refuse to condone such great evil. As most carried about with their weekend, these souls bravely stood up for what is right, taking to the streets and risking their lives, choosing to shine a light on the darkness our country so often denies. They chose to stare hatred right in its face. The ideology of white supremacy is what caused this tragedy. It must come to an end. We must name it, we must change it. We must learn to live together as friends and rise above our fear and indifference. Like our ancestors before us, we must condemn and be vigilant against Nazism, a philosophy of exclusion and violence that has claimed its most recent victims in Charlottesville. The road we walk may be a steep hill, but together we can make it. We must and we will. May peace and justice come soon for all people. May Lady Liberty's torch shine ever brighter on the path our nation is meant to be on, one of freedom, equality, and democracy for all of humanity. Thank you. This one goes out to all of the kids and families who are currently being locked in concentration camps in this country. It's called Turn Around. I weep for the children whose parents believed in a lie, that this harsh place meant a better life. I weep for the children held in cages and sterile rooms, unable to be hugged by anyone. I weep for the children left to defend themselves in courts of foreign languages. I weep for the children tired, tortured, and untaught, whose dream has turned to naught. I weep for my country. Her sins leave me stunned. Her rulers have learned the wrong lessons, upholding a history of oppression whilst flying platitudes of deception. Crush these chains of bigotry, set them free, set them free. They're just like you and me. They have hopes and dreams, best friends and loving families. They have beautiful traditions, will spark new innovations. They've known joy and sorrow, tasted success and poverty. Please release them from captivity. Stop repeating the horrors of our history. Turn around, America, or you will cease to be. Or is it true that your sweet land of liberty was always meant for the few and not the many? This poem was inspired by the fact that the CDC was censoring its employees, and this is called The 7 Words You Cannot Say in a Free Country. By the time that the blank had grown into a teenager, they learned that being blank is both blank and blank, a natural part of human blank. And therefore, they began advocating for their legal blank, and what they were taught to believe was a nation that would never ever censor the only word that accurately described their identity. They would not allow feeling blank to keep them from protesting as long as they were able. This one is for my fellow millennials. My generation is currently facing a resurgence of racism similar to the 1920s, an economic crisis that echoes back to the 1930s, the threat of looming totalitarianism like we're back in the 1940s, elders whose social standards were first broadcast in the 1950s, taking our anger to the streets and protest like it's the 1960s, fighting wars built upon national lies like we never left the 70s, suffering under trickle-down politicians like it's the 1980s. And you wonder why all of us 1990s kids are feeling just a little bit crazy. But you judge us and say we're also entitled and lazy, that wanting better opportunities and education is just a pipe dream. And how dare we decide that the best thing to do is fight this? Should we just accept a life of poverty, low wages, and high prices as we waste the entire earth with wars and greed while ignoring the climate crisis? It seems to me there must be a better version of what life is. This is a special request. It's dedicated to Ronald Foster and Willie McCoy, who were Vallejos who were shot down by the police in my city. It's called Too Many. A man is a man is a man is a man. When will you finally truly see your brother's face? You're unworthy of the title of peace officer, because peace ain't a condition that lands men in coffins. You've declared yourself his jury and executioner, determining when black life leaves this place. But one bullet is one bullet is one bullet too many. 55 bullets, you think that's plenty? Your decision is an unreasonable disgrace. For murder is murder is murder is murder. Just who do you really serve and what are you really protecting? A man asleep in a car ain't a threat. A man riding a bicycle ain't a threat. If you murder, you should pay the debt. This is my final poem. It's an honor to be here. It's called Affirmations of a Dream. I still believe that humanity is inherently loving. that love is what governs the soul, that the soul is the compass pointing towards the heart, that heart beats steady towards a dream, that dream will be realized by our unity, that these actions of unity will bring forth a time of peace. For we simply cannot continue the paths of greed that only breeds suffering and turmoil, wars over gold and for oil. We must cease to robotically pursue these ancient visions of division set by long dead eyes left blinded by hatred, planned in minds soured by frustration. Yet the clown emperor, he is naked, behind old flags still waving, with old beliefs oft left unshaken. For here we stand, pledging allegiance to a nation built on idealistic foundations, left cracked by the weight of hypocrisy. A nation built on the backs of the invisible, whose voices were long silenced, and who now cry out with wisdom against the tyranny of this flawed system. No, we can no longer ignore that for which we have waited, that for which we are fated. On this day we must awaken, for history is ours for the making, but we must rise to take it, for the hour is growing later, and clocks are meant to move forward, and freedom is not easily forgotten once tasted. We are the majority, we are the ones who care. We haven't the time for despair. With every passing second we must affirm our hope. In hardship or opportunity, from the country to the city, our unity must build up community. Empowered by kindness, leaping in with faith or faithless, we shall fight until all are free, moving through all tragedy, all together, you and me, until that dream is reached, an eternal guarantee that every earthly soul is assured a life of dignity simply by its existence. Thank you very much.